Welcome to the Enlightened Couch Potato podcast. My name is Nicholas Rave.
I'm Adrianne Gunn. And here
this
we are.
podcast is where we help people learn how to watch movies and TV for maximum psychological and spiritual development.
Yes, yes. Also, we do other things, but I'm pretty sure Nicholas is the last time you talked about it. The other things we do are exactly that as well, right? When we're just shooting the S about TV, we're still teaching you how to watch for maximum psychological and spiritual development. I said it almost without tripping. Blah, 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 blah.
One of the things I've been thinking about as we've had this conversation about making the first part of every episode just be answering the question, what are you watching? Mm-hmm. Is I've been thinking just having like a journal, like a dream journal, but for your for what you're watching.
Nicholas.
Makes sense to me.
Nicholas is now sharing my idea, by the way.
Oh, shit.
And remember, I don't know if you remember this, behind the scenes conversation where I was like, what we should do is take the dream journaling process and create our own journal for watching television. And then literally 3 minutes later, you're like, it's like a dream journal, only for television.
You didn't just say that, did you?
No, it was like last week.
Because if you did, I'm losing my mind.
Last week, we were literally in a conversation where I said we should take the dream journaling process and make our own journal for watching TV. And then 3 minutes after I said that, you're like, oh, it's like a dream journal, but only for watching TV. That's a really good idea. And then you caught yourself and said, oh,
didn't you just say that? Yeah. Okay. I thought you meant you said it 3 minutes ago right now. And I was just saying it again. Then I was going to be like, I think I need to go get my brain checked out.
No, not in today's pre. Woo!
I still might need to do that, though.
Welcome to the Inside Moments, everyone. So I have to reveal that I am actually a real person that watches TV and then feels things.
What?
We're not joking about this. We use and watch TV and then we come to each other and talk about it. So
what have you been watching, Adrianne?
I specifically chose not to calm or shift my emotions about what I'm watching. And it's very likely that this might be a rant in my head before pressing the record, before sitting down to go. I did walk through whether there were easy ways for me to explain this thing. So straight up, I live a life where oftentimes in the middle of the day, that's when I'm eating and I have my alone moments. My entrepreneuring is such that I often can do whatever the F I want with the middle of my day, which is awesome. Mm. So I'm watching this show Spinning Out. I told you yesterday that I'm watching this speed skating show. And do you ever just find yourself yelling at the television? Just yelling at the things that happen. So I yell at the television often at different levels. And this particular day, I'm yelling at a phenomenon that I discovered. Yesterday, we talked about that middle period of the TV shows we watched. And I was saying that a lot of the stuff that I watched was sort of identity based and identity reaffirming. I have many an identity. I imagine you do as well. And I have noticed a trend in American television. Stuff that's produced in American television. And I was able to notice this by watching Canadian produced television. And this mirrors my experience of growing up in Portland and then moving to Vegas. Now, so the rant, the complaint I have is that there's a lot of pretense and exposition in American television. And there's a lot of pretense and exposition in the Pacific Northwest. Portland is a beautiful example of a collection of people who claim to be open-minded and liberal, and they do it in a particular way where they have labels that in cities where diversity actually exists, people don't talk about diversity. They just talk to each other. So the thing that I noticed, and it's the difference of like when I was in New York and I got on a subway and a bunch of different kinds of people got on, my body relaxed at this supremely cellular level. I started breathing in a way that I didn't know that I was holding my breath. And that was my experience of moving to Las Vegas.
Wow.
And finding that there were different kinds of people there, and people just walked up and talked to you like they would just say hello and then listen and then respond in kind. And you might not ever get to talking about your identities, or even people who found themselves attracted to you. They might be of all sorts of races or genders, and they might just come over and find out if you're interested in them, which is why I found out that men are a delightful group of humans to be intimate with, because I shaved my hair off before I moved to Las Vegas. And in Portland in the 90s, that would have meant a very militant dyke kind of statement here. The way that I dressed and shaving my hair. There in Vegas, I was just treated like I was amaretto candy. And if you remember in the 90s, amaretto was a really, really popular. Remember how hazelnut and pumpkin spice are popular now?
Yeah.
So amaretto was the first hazelnut.
I remember.
Amaretto, right? So apparently one can just exist in the world and exchange and connect with people. And I'm bringing this up because when I came back to Portland, I even had the second time I came back to Portland, I had this instance. I was working at Lowe's, and I would have 90-second to 3-minute interactions with people. And in Lowe's with strangers, I would hear about their political views and their open-mindedness. I'm just ringing up their fucking hammers and nails and caulk and paint, right? And plants that I would sneeze about because allergies. In any other of my service jobs in Phoenix and Vegas, no one talks about the pretense of their political views. And it got weird. I'm like, is this because I'm brownish? Is that why they're telling me? But no, it's a very fucking Portland thing. So here's the deal. American produced television versus
I think the term is virtue signaling.
I think maybe, yes. So this show, in the very first episode, so it's set in there's like a ski area that has, it's a snowy, and it's in Idaho. And so the main character is walking across a stretch of whatever, and a black person is there. The two of them greet each other as though they've known each other for a really long time. And the black character basically says, "Hi, I'm a black person in a ski area. I've been skiing with my friends. And now I've said a word that makes me seem so very white. Ha, ha, ha." Okay, great. That's annoying. It's a weird exposition. It's walking in and like, "Hi, I'm a black person." It's like if the doctor happens to be black, and in the US, it's like, "Hi, I'm your black doctor today. Let's talk doctory things." That is going to be in the underlying. His second scene was, "Hi," with a person he's been working with for months. The same person we've already established they fucking know each other. And his lines are basically, "I'm a black guy who works here because I need the money because I'm also poor, surrounded by," he practically says that. And that's annoying enough. So now I'm on episode 5, and the gay male ice skating character, his first lines that "I'm going to establish that I exist as a human." His first lines are, "Oh my gosh, look how gay I am. And I'm attracted to that guy over there. Oh, I'm commiserating with the Asian woman," who at no point ever has to explain her Asianness, because she just gets to be a person who has ice skating issues. Whew. Okay. The contrast is that I have watched so much Canadian produced television, and there's this concept called, what is it, open casting? What is it? I've just forgotten it. Anyway, what they do is they just write characters who interact with each other, and they have different dynamics and roles. And then they put any race or whatever in there. Right. People who have specific desires sexually, they just go up and they talk to the person, and then suddenly you notice that they're kissing because it turns out they're attracted to each other. They don't have to announce or have exposition about your doctor will be whatever color, and they'll just come in and do the job and say the lines that a doctor would say if they were in a fucking appointment with you. So then I think at the beginning of episode 5, there's a whole nother black person in this show, and it's a woman. And so the two black people in the ski lodge. Now, granted, black people in a ski lodge are going to have black experiences, but none of them have had they don't have names yet. This woman shows up. She doesn't even have a name yet, but she's already having a black experience, as if she's only supposed to be in the show to illustrate blackness in this experience, rather than like, maybe she has a headache that day. It drives me fucking crazy because that's not the thing that in a Canadian show, and I'm talking a lot of them. I'm talking Continuum. I'm talking Lost Girl. I'm talking I've seen at least 20 Canadian produced shows where just people, you might know them for 2 seasons before they describe anything that has to do with the experience of them being bisexual, gay, polyamorous, from India, from Pakistan, anywhere they're from. No one walks onto the stage and, hi, I'm going to be your black person for this episode.
Right.
I might get shot in 2 minutes, or I'm going to have an experience that gets us talking about race. And what I'm saying is that I have emotions and opinions about this. My preference for what is this? I'm so stirred up I can't find words. My preference is for people to exist and be connecting with each other around the actual things that are going on in the storyline. That's my preference. That is my wish. That I think that, like, it's not exposure. It's an E word that I'm trying to find. For people to be the representation that I prefer is the one where you just show up, connect, and you just get to be a fucking person in a situation and not have to do this dumbass fucking pretense that it's almost, microaggressions is a term that exists now. I grew up, I spent 40 years of my life in one of these situations in a place where everybody announces their liberal open-mindedness and doesn't, I just like representation to feel different. That is my rant. This drives me crazy about how television in the US is different than other places where people are actually honored. Diversity is actually honored. And it's not like they don't talk about it at some point. They just actually fucking connect with people without policing the language or announce. I might just, for the sake of being ridiculous, I might just announce to people. I might just take a week and just wander around Portland announcing, hello, I am a biracial bisexual. I used to be bipolar, but that doesn't fucking exist because diseases are weird and healable. Can I have a tri T, which is double? It's redundant. I don't want a TT because chai means tea. I just want you to make me a latte that's made of not coffee. I don't think I'll do that though, because that's fucking weird. I'm gonna have some water and cool off.
Whew.
I'm gonna have my water down my sweater.
Well,
I don't know if you can relate. I imagine maybe you cannot. I don't require you to relate. I'm just talking about a thing people need to know exists, and it's frustrating.
I think that there are some things that it's better to hear from some people than from other people. And I think this is an issue and a subject that I very much appreciate you being vocal about. On the one hand, I think what you're describing can be simply explained as bad writing. It's lazy, bad writing because they're not actually getting into the character. But I will also say that there are a lot of attempts to be diverse and not racist that are actually very racist.
Yes.
And they're very divisive, and they give people these categories and labels to start looking at the world through, and then you can't see anything other than that. And to me, the point of all this work that we're supposed to be doing on these issues is to get to the place that you're describing, which is you're just a person, and we're relating to you as a person, which is a very NLP concept.
Totally.
I hear you. I recognize it as well, although it definitely doesn't affect me in a personal way. Although I will say that I am incredibly aware of the pervasive fear of being called racist.
Sure.
That is, as someone who is not a minority, that is something that I think is extremely real, and I try my best to be open-minded and compassionate and understanding of other people's experiences in the world. And I do think that there are people who, if you give someone a word that you can use that will cut people down anywhere you go, and you can destroy people's lives and careers, of course there are going to be some people who are going to abuse that word.
Yeah, well, and it's as if at some point people were just taught the word racist or bigot equals bad person, and we've been constructed as tiny humans in this moralizing way. This is all in radical honesty. It's one of the bigger parts of radical honesty, this idea of moralizing and good and bad and making that tangible and real as a deeply lived program inside. But the problem with just deciding that a word equals you're a bad person who does bad things is that you take it away from the fact that we're all racist and predisposed to specific things because we've been programmed that way in a society that is a collections of ideas about things. And the other things that pissed me off in this show were like ideas about ownership of romantic interests. This drives me crazy. Like people all over the place in this show are making really, really irrational, highly emotional, charged decisions. And that is fine. People seem to do that. I think that's true about most people. And one of the things that I feel is really gross is this idea that we keep supporting in television that if somebody is attracted to a person, that person is theirs suddenly. And no one else is allowed to also be attracted to the person. And these dynamics of like people being very jealous and fighting over each other. Also, since it's an ice skating thing, there's this dynamic of like mothers and daughters and women being really, really, really cruel, utilizing language as weapons to get into each other's heads and shred each other's ego and shred men's egos as this tool. And I'm like, oh, this is a bigger thing.
Are you hate watching this show?
I just wanted to see how much of this particular culture this show was going to dive into and continue to support. Because I think, yes, on one level it's bad writing, but it's also a highly pervasive style of bad writing.
Yeah, they're doing it because it appeals to a certain...
an American institution of storytelling. That when I compare it to it's Netflix, I have access to the different. I don't know how to unwind these weird rules that show up in the show, and so I'm watching it to remind myself cellularly of, oh, this is a very us US thing, and I'm allowing myself to sit into it. Because I think you said yesterday and other times that resistance, you have an opinion about resistance, and I think resistance is there to indicate something of importance. And so I'm currently paying attention to my resistance and my yelling at these characters to recognize things that I'm upset about in the world. And to let my resistance and anger and wanting to shun things to point out things that want healing in me.
Resistance is an interesting word. I mean, I think you're trying not to be resistant to the experience that you're having, but you're getting triggered by what you're watching. And like when I say bad writing, like I often think it's like lazy writing. It's like comedy that's very broad in the sense that it's like I can just say this word. Like if you listen to humor from the 90s and probably the 80s too, but I wasn't as big on it. But humor in the 90s, you could just say the word gay and people would start laughing because it would make people uncomfortable. But there was no joke. Like if you watch, I tried to watch Dodgeball, the Ben Stiller movie. I tried to watch Dodgeball with my son. because I remembered it being funny. And I'm watching it now and I'm like, oh, like 90% of the jokes in this movie are just, they're not even jokes. They're just the fact that this person is gay or that this person might be in a gay situation. And then we're all supposed to go and laugh because that's not a joke. Like it makes people laugh, but it's not a joke. It's just, I just pushed a button and it triggered a feeling inside a person. And now I can make an entire movie that people will pay money to go watch. And to me, the things you're describing are lazy in a similar way that I can go bump. And then the person is like, oh yeah, I get that. And it brings up feelings in the audience. But it's lazy. It's paint by numbers. And it's also arguably damaging as well.
Totally. I just it's bad enough to just write exposition, Star Wars, and not actually come up with a plot or characters, Star Wars. And I think more people need to realize when things are, you can enjoy something that's poorly executed. And we'll teach you how. That's part of our technique, is helping you figure out how to drop in and say yes and really enjoy things that you're watching, even if you wouldn't necessarily. And there are things that could shift. And there are reasons why reasons why bad shit doesn't hold up as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think something that isn't a good lesson to take from what you're doing here is that you are applying the same principles of how to watch movies and TV for maximum psychological and spiritual development. You are applying those same principles to something that's bothering you. This isn't even something you're enjoying as much, although maybe you're enjoying other aspects of it, but there are aspects of it that are really getting to you, and yet you're going back to it and still getting value from it.
Totally.
Some part of you says keep watching, and I've totally done that. I've watched things where I'm like, I like hate watching is a real thing. Didn't expect to have this conversation as the opener to our podcast.
You're welcome. You now know maybe more about me, maybe not at all.
No, I very much appreciate everything that you said.
So Nicholas, what are you watching?
Well, I only watched one thing since yesterday, since we had a podcast yesterday, but it was great. I started Altered Carbon season 2.
Oh, fuck yes.
Speaking of a show where who gives a fuck what race anybody is? Yes. Like the whole point of the show, for those of you who haven't seen it, spoilers, the idea is that you can download a human personality onto like a little disc, basically, and then you can upload it into different bodies. Yep. So throughout the show, like the main character in this episode starts out in an Asian lounge singer's body, which they then kill, and then he wakes up. I believe he was actually he's Asian in his original body, right? That's his original body. His name's Takashi, right? Yeah. And then he's a white dude in the last season. Mm-hmm. He starts out this season in an Asian lounge singer's body who they
beautiful voice
very quickly kill, and then wakes up in a sexy black man's body. Truth. I think that's probably who he's going to be in for the rest of the season. But they never mention it. It's not a point. Nobody gives a fuck. Nope. Yeah.
No. Oh, I'm so excited for you. I think you're going to like this season. Okay, so we're in the...
wait, can I comment on one thing about the episode that I thought was really cool? So the slight spoilers if you haven't seen it yet, but one thing that I've thought about a lot is this idea that you can download a personality or download your entire consciousness into a digital form of some sort, I think is bullshit. Like, I don't think technology will maybe ever get there, at least not in the way that we think, because it's based on the idea that your personality and consciousness is in your brain, not your body.
Well, they actually don't talk about where it comes from.
Well, that's one of the things I was going to say is that in the first season, I was kind of right. In the first season, I was kind of like, fine, I'll ignore that. But the idea that you could, I mean, maybe you could take like a picture of the whole body and then, but my point is that your whole body is your brain. This is a principle in bioenergetics and in a ton of research that validates this idea that your body affects your consciousness or is inextricably linked. Your consciousness arises from your body, which means that if we swapped bodies, I wouldn't be me anymore and you wouldn't be you anymore instantaneously. You can't even be the same person without the body that you're in. So the idea of like swapping these things was kind of like, but they seem to be hinting at that idea in the very first episode of second season. So I was like, okay, all right, show me more.
Well, they also talk about how there's this, in the first season, they talk about a sickness, sleeve sickness of the consciousness not integrating or rejecting.
Right, like acclimating to it, yeah.
Yeah, acclimating, and that this person is trained in ways that they acclimate a lot faster than other people. Very interesting. I'm excited for us to geek out about this.
Good. Well, I'm going to go through it, and as we go through it, I'll be taking notes and talking about my different insights from it. There was also the thing about state-dependent memory was something else that they said specifically, which is this straight-up NLP term.
Yeah.
And he has to like recall something that I'm not exactly sure why he forgot in the first place. Maybe just because he hadn't integrated into the body yet. Yeah. But in order to remind himself what had happened, he had gotten stabbed previously. So he stabs himself again, which I will say, like, there are easier ways to do that if you're a hypnotist.
Yeah, you don't actually have to. State-dependent memory doesn't require you to actually get into the state fully.
Yeah, there are ways to shortcut that or get into some of the state, but you don't actually have to stab yourself. But it was super, super cool in the show for to be,
Yeah.
Anthony Mackie is so fucking cool in this role. I'm like so glad they picked him for this.
What's his is he Falcon?
He's Falcon in the Marvel movies. That's right. And he's coming out in the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show. There's going to be a whole TV show on Disney Plus that's just about the dude with the metal arm and the flying dude.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
It's going to be like a buddy hero kind of thing.
Hero thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they're going to be like a little bit antagonistic with each other because they have different styles and
Captain's my friend.
And Captain America gave Falcon the shield. He didn't give it to his best friend from childhood, Bucky. So I wonder if that's going to be an issue.
Oh, romance issues.
Yeah. Okay. I am such a Marvel head. I am not done with that. Like I know people are like superhero movies are played out. No, they're not. Not for me.
I almost wore my Avengers sweatshirt. Maybe I will someday. It's just so, it's my sleepy shirt. So I don't know if I have
one of the 3 t-shirts that I own is a Captain America t-shirt.
Nice. Okay, so where we left off, we got into this part where we're in the pre-awakening, sort of, I consider it a sort of identity defining and reinforcing. Like for some people, the phase of their life where they just discover what they like, they just stay there. Mm-hmm. Much like the people who still listen to the same albums and stuff that they listened to in high school. My tendencies and genres in my adult world, and I would say awakening for me happened around 30-ish when I started watching differently.
Huh.
I love indie films, and indie films were a different thing than in the 90s than they are now. There was a crossover of like B movies, and then there were indie films. So indie films would equal a bunch of things that Catherine Keener, Parker Posey, and
I love Catherine Keener. I saw her in an airport once.
That's where they sort of made their bread and butter for a lot of years. And who else is in, like, you could even find Rae Don Chong in indie movies, who is so in Cheech and Chong, super old reference. Chong's daughter, Rae Don Chong, was in a bunch of like indie films back in the day. But what's interesting is there's a pacing that's different. There's a storytelling that's different. The things I love are like Laurel Canyon, Grand Canyon. I just like things with the name Canyon. There's this movie, Myth of Fingerprints. So there are ensemble movies where there might be 5 plots happening with different people. Grand Canyon is one of those. There are 5 or so different stories happening in LA, and then they sort of converge at Grand Canyon. It's beautiful, slow storytelling, really relational. There's a movie, The Myth of Fingerprints is one of these dynamics where the prodigal insert, son or daughter, returns home. Home is somewhat dysfunctional, and they left and they've been gone a while, and now they're coming back for some reason. So Myth of Fingerprints is Noah Wyle is in it, and he returns home to some situation. I'm trying to remember her name. Julianne Moore has this amazing piece. So there's a whole thread of movies that I watched that I liked to capture just these moments of beauty and truth that every now and then I think movies and TV just get right. And they're doing it more often. But there's this moment. Julianne Moore's character plays a sister, and I think she's a little lost, probably depressed. I don't even know why she goes into this, but she describes it as she's sitting at her desk and she picks up the phone and she knows that something is supposed to happen or come next. And so she finds herself looking around the desk until she finds her name on the plaque of the desk and then says her name. There's just this stunning scene. Go watch Myth of Fingerprints. No one's seen it. It's really good. So there's this collection for me of these movies, or these movies where a group of friends that used to be connected suddenly reconnects at a cabin in the woods, and then they're all like, different people have
and then
sex
zombies?
No, not and then zombies. It's just this slow rolling, independent film where you're focusing on it's very much the same repeat of Breakfast Club. This idea that people are situationally wrapped around, and you get to see different people living different challenges in a short amount of time, in a slow enough roll. Like that the characters don't massively shift, but they shift just this much so that you know that whether life actually changes all that much, some slight perspective means that they might be okayer than at the top of the movie. You know, the promise isn't big. The promise is like, and they're funny as fuck because they're dramedy. They're dramas.
Right.
And real life is just inherently funny.
Right. There's weight to it. And there's weight to the comedy. It's not just complete silliness. Right.
And one of the first, this may have been a more mass-produced sort of movie. One of the first ones that I started watching regularly for reasons was 28 Days. It's Sandra Bullock rehab movie. I also love rehab movies or the mental hospital movies.
Can I just pause you for a second? I saw something recently where they had an article that was just stupid internet articles. There was like similar titles that people should not get confused. And one of the ones on there was 28 Days and 28 Days Later. And they're like, yes, 28 Days Later is not a sequel to the Sandra Bullock movie. No. It is a straight up horrifying zombie film.
Yes.
One of the best.
Yeah, so 28 Days is Sandra Bullock's life spins out of control because she likes alcohol and coke, and she ends up in a rehab. And my favorite bits include Loudon Wainwright, who may as well be the soundtrack. So people like Rufus Wainwright, and then I guess there's a Lucy. There are several sisters in the family. Loudon,
I didn't know that. I'm only familiar with Rufus. I didn't know he had siblings that were also musically inclined.
Yeah, there's like a whole family of Wainwrights, and there's another hyphen name that's in the family. I think Kaplansky is in there too. There's like 6 really pretty famous songwriters in that, but he's in the background of this, playing some interesting songs to sort of articulate the action as it goes. And there's a song, I'd rather be dreaming than living, because living is so hard to do. It happens behind this scene. I would watch that movie on purpose in times when I felt that I was being destructive and out of control, and essentially like outside of my heart and not remembering not remembering that I'm responsible for who I'm being. I'm responsible for my own results, and also that my I guess my mission. I had a mission statement that I still resonate with. That I want to have every room better for my having been there.
Right. And
when I lose that line, and definitely in my 20s, I haven't watched this movie probably in 10 years because I have a different setup. But when I would find myself off that path, I would watch this movie and it would drop me back into some core stuff from what I was saying yesterday, from this like 12-step paradigm of taking different levels of responsibility. Now, I will clarify, I believe that there's a 13th step and I'm in it. And some of my core grounding are around some of these ideas that show up and are teased about in this movie. So
like movies as like a state in a pill. Mm-hmm. Like I use this movie as a touchstone to go and get me back into. I don't do that with movies as much. For me, I use music for that. I have songs that I go to that are like, I can put this song on and it's like reaching out and touching a magic stone that like puts me in a certain state. In NLP, we call it anchors.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the first level of how I utilize it somewhere is rather than denying where I'm at. Yeah. I will watch the movie that says, I see you. I see that you're hurting. I feel you. I totally get it. Yes, this is a real thing. And then even like when I say that the characters don't necessarily, sometimes they do find a path, or they meet a person or something happens and they go from like meep to bang. And generally in these, it's just, you know what? The grind is a true real thing that you step forward each day, and joy and connection can happen in these small moments. And it's usually they're just what I think the most prominent version of this in non-indie film was the moment in American Beauty where the ridiculously depressed guy is standing there and they're both watching a plastic bag dance in the wind. Yeah. And so I have there's a whole legion of things I watch that are the plastic bag dancing in the wind movies.
I totally get what you're going for. And I think movies and stories that give a sense of presence, that it makes you think about the significance of, for me, I have this thing I do with my clients where I'll train them to associate like a presence trance with this sensation of just feeling your fingers. Because in order to get out of your head, you have to get in your body. It's the only other place to go. So when you're lost in your head and you want to get in your body, you can use your breath. That's a good way. That's why so many meditations are about breathing. But this is another way to do it, is just feel the feeling when your attention goes from whatever you're thinking about in your head to this. To me, that's like instantaneously, like right now, right into this present moment. And stories that do that, I guess the equivalent for me that is equally poignant but not exactly the same thing is stories that make me think about mortality. Stories that make me feel like you're dying right now. You're dying, and one day this is all going to be over. And I love that stuff because it makes me go, it brings so much richness and beauty to every precious moment. And it makes me want to do more. It makes me, like, I got into I think I was doing a podcast, actually. I was being interviewed by somebody, and I shared an opinion that I think was not very popular with at least with him, or probably with his listeners. But one of the things that I said is I do not believe in an afterlife. And I find it to be very useful for me to not believe in an afterlife. I'm relatively agnostic about it, in the sense that I think it's possible that there might be, because who knows? How could you know? But I would rather be pleasantly surprised to show up and discover that there is one,
right?
Rather than live my life as if there is one. Because the problem with that, for me, is that I see a trap. I see the possibility that I might not suck the life out of every single moment that I have, because some part of me is like, well, it's no big deal. I have more. And for me, when I'm like, no, you fucking don't.
Yeah.
This really struck me when I was listening to a story of this young YouTube creator was talking about how his father died in his arms when he was 17 years old. And he said, the last thing my father said to me was, I love you so much. Mm-hmm. And like holding him at the bottom of the stairs. And he talked about how this has given him this profound sense that life is short.
Sure.
And I think that movies that remind me of that, I don't know. There's Good Place. The last episode of The Good Place, that's one of the things I found so beautiful about it, was they were just talking about death and talking about like, this is where it's going, and the idea of ceasing existence entirely, totally. Walking into the nothingness and the void.
A lot of those ensemble movies that I mentioned, in nearly every one of them, someone is dying or someone is losing their hearing or sight.
Yeah.
Or that Five Senses is an amazing movie that people don't know about. Mary Louise Parker was also often in indie flicks. This is one that she was in. Yeah. A lot of them, somebody is dying of cancer or just discovered it.
Yeah.
Oh, Joshua Jackson is in a beautiful movie called 2 Weeks, where he finds out he has terminal cancer, and then he gets on an Indian motorcycle and just rides across Canada. It's a beautiful movie.
Wow.
Yeah, he just takes off on a motorcycle.
So this is a pretty easy transition, if you don't mind, for me to talk about one of my movies.
I would love that.
So this was the first movie that I watched. I would call this pre-waking up, but it was the first that I can recall of a film going experience where I felt like I had what I would call a spiritual experience, where something happened in that movie and I came out different on the other side, and I could not explain to you what was going on. And what was so interesting about it to me was that I was there with my fiance, I think at the time, and a group of other people. And we left the movie, and everyone but the two of us hated the movie. They hated it, and they were like, that was so stupid. I didn't get it. It didn't make any sense. What was going on? And they weren't into it at all. For the last like 15, 20 minutes of the movie, I was sobbing uncontrollably in the movie theater, and I couldn't even tell you why.
Right.
And this is, if you put a gun to my head and said, what is your favorite movie of all time, it would probably be this. And I don't like picking favorites. So I really wouldn't want to answer that. But if I had to pick one movie, it's a movie called The Fountain.
I don't know if I've seen that.
I have seen it more times than probably almost any other movie, because I keep introducing new people to it. Nobody's seen it.
I'm writing it down. Every time that somebody says a movie title, I don't know if people notice this. Some people are noticers, some are not. So I access a file of the 2 different times that I worked at Hollywood Video. One of the times that I worked at Hollywood Video, I was 18, and I worked there for about a year. And I did the other spot 6 months to 8 months. So I often have this thing is like, oh, I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen the cover. I know the cover. I've seen it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
In the sense of like The Fountain. Can I access in my visual index of movies what that is? And somehow, who's the actor that plays Hannibal Lecter? What's his name?
Anthony Hopkins.
Is Anthony Hopkins in The Fountain?
No. So
Great.
The Fountain is Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz.
Interesting.
And it's made by Darren Aronofsky, who's also one of my favorite filmmakers in general. He's had a few misses, but when he hits, he just there's a level of depth spiritually and philosophically to his films,
right.
and The Fountain in particular. And it very much deals with mortality and with death, and it's fucking great. We should do an entire episode on it because it does bear some interpretation. It's a little hard to understand what's going on. So there's sort of 3 stories going on simultaneously. Or they're not happening simultaneously, but they're being told simultaneously. So it's helpful to know if you go into it, just as a precursor, if you go into it. The story that's being told in the past is fictional. That one didn't really happen. But the other 2 stories, one of them is in the middle, and that one is actually happening. The other one is supposed to be set 500 years in the future.
Oh.
And most people, if you understand that, it will help a lot to like piece together what's going on in the movie. But oh my good God, that movie is so beautiful. And you want to talk about a transcendent experience that if you let that movie hypnotize you, I promise you, it will take you places where you will be able to face your fear of death and have this truly psychedelic experience.
So was that the change for you? Something about death specifically? It
was about death, and it was about love. It was about like there's this one scene. I'm going to spoil this moment. There's this one scene near the end of the movie when Hugh Jackman is laughing and crying, and he's like staring at the camera, and he goes, "I'm going to die. I'm going to die." And he's laughing and crying at the same time. And it's like, yeah. So the love element of it, the relationship component really spoke to me because I have this profound sense of like loyalty. And like when I love someone, like I will die for them and I will kill for them and I will work for them and I'll sacrifice everything. And it plays on that. He has that, and it plays on it, and it puts him in this impossible position where the only way to do what she wants is to solve this problem. And he thinks he solved it in one way, but it turns out that he had to solve it inside and not outside. God damn, it's so good. It's so good, and it's gorgeous. Like the movie, they do these scenes in a nebula, like in space, and it turned and they didn't have a lot of money for it. Like this was originally going to be a Brad Pitt movie, and then it didn't happen, and then Hugh Jackman came in, and I'm so glad. Like I love Brad Pitt, but Hugh Jackman just nails this part.
Sure.
So they do these scenes where he's traveling through space in this bubble. And he goes into these nebula, and the way they did it was microscopic photography, where they would zoom way in on petri dishes with different colors and different chemicals, and they would take a drop of chemical and it would go like this, and instead of using CGI for the special effects, they did this like microscopic photography and then blew it up. And it's like nothing you've ever seen. It's so beautiful. I'm totally overselling it at this point, but it is my favorite movie. So,
well, so do you recall, did something crack open in that moment, or did it take other movies to get you going, wait a second? I think there's something here.
Well, years later, when I was watching it again in another relationship, we had a really deep conversation about something called the Karmic Wheel. It's a Buddhist concept. It's basically the idea that like you're gonna keep getting reincarnated until you learn the lessons.
Right.
And when you learn the lessons, you're not on the wheel anymore. And I'm probably not doing the concept justice, but when you start to think about, there's a lot of rings in the symbolism of rings in the movie. Mm-hmm. And when you think about that as the archetype that they're going for and the mythology that they're going for, to me, like breaking out of that karmic wheel, that was a big part of it, I think. Of the deeper insight for me, and not just getting that at an intellectual level, but feeling it and embracing death as this great adventure. For
me, the recognition. So I know that I was utilizing, and I would go back to watch 28 Days to get to sort of as a touchstone. And I too have albums that do that. I don't know if I've told her this. I don't know why this is a story I'm telling. There's a songwriter, McKinley, who has an album, and I found it in one of those like listening piles in Las Vegas. She's a Portland songwriter, but I found her music in Vegas, even though I was in the songwriting community in Portland. And it used to be I'm really, really sad, so I'm going to listen to this because I'm sad, my sad salve album. And then it eventually became a sex album, which is awesome. I think she would, if I haven't already told her that. No, it was perfect for, kind of like Nina Simone and It's Raining and I Don't Drink Wine, but I would to listen to Nina Simone. And
that was so much packed into one sentence. Nina Simone and It's Raining and I Don't Drink Wine, but wow.
Like I want to be holding wine and staring out this rainy window and listening to
you just painted a picture with an efficiency of words that was so good.
So that was in high school. Nina Simone would be sad and it'd be raining and I would, I didn't drink wine, but I would imagine what wine drinking might feel like if one were. But then McKinley's album ended up being the like sad album. And so 28 Days was almost like that. I would be feeling distant from myself and the truth. I would be feeling sort of destructive, and I would watch that movie and it would sort of reset me and I would take different path the next. Like in the arc of the 98 minutes or whatever, I would start walking the next day differently. And what really for me, this is a way that I had to learn things for a very long time. And I think this might be a wonderful thing of like leaving the 12-step phenomenon of having to hit bottom in order to start climbing out of it. Was I actually, to realize that television and movies could be utilized, that didn't hit for me until I had a kind of a complete mental snap. And I was thinking earlier, it's possible I had a stroke. I don't know. But there seemed, I went back to college as an adult. I went back at 27, and I think I might have been 29 or 30 at this moment, where I had this term. In the past, I'd always been able to procrastinate in such a form. When I was talking about resistance as a tool, I've recognized resistance for me as an important thing. With assignments, with theater, my strategy for a very, very long time was to just hate and push back against something until I spun myself at some point into probably a sarcastic joke that had a smidge of brilliance in it. So in my paper writing process, I would get really mad at the assignment over and over and over and over again for like days or weeks or whatever. And then sometimes I remember I had to write a thing. This was not in college, but I did compare Frankenstein and Hamlet. And I've stirred around, I was grumpy last minute, losing sleep, and I'm like, well, they're both named after meat. And whatever they do fucks up everyone. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then I wrote a paper, men named after meat and the people that love them. So I followed that arc, but I was pissed, right? So I thought that strategy was going to work. And for some reason, at this point in my life, I did not suddenly get some inspiration. I just kept getting more and more agitated. And a therapist that I was working with at the time, we were not well matched. She was very, very certain I would like tapping. Mm. And so she taught me some tapping technique or whatever that was theoretically supposed to take my anxiety down, but instead I pushed a wrong button or something. And then I had my first panic and anxiety thing that I'd had in 10 years. And it wasn't even, the paper wasn't even, it was just a rough draft due date that I missed because I was too mentally blah. So I just sort of crawled through that term, not being able to rely on the same kinds of like, I always come up with a great thing in the last minute. I always come through. I couldn't. And I eked out something and then just sort of like slugged my way across the finish line of that term. And then I swear to you, I heard like something snapped. And the only thing that I was required to do at that time, I was hired to be in a play called Slap That Bitch. And we were in rehearsals. So I woke up, I did shower, and then I would make breakfast, and I would plop down in this like giant like wood mission chair in front of an old style wooden table with like, I would put my feet up on the bars under the table, and then I watched, I think there were only 4 seasons of The L Word and like 33 movies. And when I had to, I would go to these rehearsals, which were like 2 or 3 times a week. But every hour from the end of the term to the beginning of the next term, I just watched these movies and the same flavor of indie flicks and things and I just slowly inched back. And I wish I could have had a thought like, is this healthy? I didn't really feel like there was anything else to do but to press next and go. It just felt as though I got sucked into a healing chamber in the sense that this was the only thing. And I just turtled myself in that place. And I wasn't even in a cozy chair. Like I was at the alert student, because it's a mission hefty, like teachers. It wasn't even wheels. It didn't move. I just sat there
for hours,
for 3 straight weeks, every hour that I was awake. And then I did it again because there was somewhere real deep back in there that knew that this was my way back, even if I hadn't actively made it as a decision. And I was a functional human at the other side of it.
Wow.
And it was about a year later that I was working with, and I learned a lot of stuff. I got exposed to a lot of people dealing with their shit in a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
I started working with a spiritual coach and sort of energy worker. And I don't recall if it was her instruction or my curiosity of realizing that I hadn't ever finished Xena Warrior Princess because it got cut off in my college years. So I went back and started watching that. And the themes that happened in that show were reflecting some of the spiritual themes that were in this body of work of like coaching and approaching life in a different way. And then I went from Xena Warrior Princess, like the spiritual awakening of Xena Warrior Princess, to Battlestar Galactica, which might be one of the most overtly spiritually, and then I knew I was in it. This is a thing. This was my meditation.
This was your waking up?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So that story, can I jump in here? That story about the 3 weeks scares me. Honestly, like it triggers stuff in me because I've had experiences of times in the past where I've gone down rabbit holes where, like, I think I mentioned to you, the Whedonverse, Joss Whedon shows, Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, and Angel. I watched, there's a lot of episodes there. It's like 7 seasons of Buffy and 5 of Angel or something like that.
21, 22
There's a lot of episodes. And I watched all of those episodes in a row while my life was spinning out of control, and I should have been doing something to stop it. And I wasn't. Mm-hmm. And I was literally sitting in a closet because that's what I had set up as my office.
Right.
And it was super hot and I was sweaty and I was supposed to be doing work and I wasn't. And I was just for hours and hours, weeks and weeks and weeks, I was doing this. And this was not a good thing for me. Sure. Although I do think I'm sure there's some benefit that I got from it, but I was not practicing what we're talking about in there. I wasn't surrendering to it. I had other things I needed to be doing, and I was going, I don't want to do that. And then I was going, distract me more, entertain me more, because it's scary. That's scary. I don't want to. Yeah. And the thought that you could actually trust that impulse enough to just, my girlfriend calls it lumping. Yeah. She says that when she gets depressed, she just wants to lump.
Right.
And it's been a very healing thing for me, or for me to be like, that's okay. You can come lump over here. I'll love you while you lump. I think you're very sexy when you lump. And for you to just be like, I am just going to watch these things, and then to trust it for 3 weeks. Like, when I think about being in that place, there's a voice in my head that's like, come on, it's been 2 weeks. Like, all right, we trusted this long, but get your ass up off that and start fucking doing something. Yeah. And I honestly, I'm saying this as like, I don't know, how does one know what's right for someone else? Like, there's you have to reach inside and find a wisdom that says this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or there's not. Because there's been other times in my life when I've gone, I have 3 days and I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I can do right now that should get done, and then I've gone, no, I'm gonna watch TV, and I've done that. And it was the right thing to do. But then there were other times when I've done it and it's definitely been, I mean, right and wrong. That's not really the point. It's more like in alignment or out of alignment or yeah.
I think this question is an episode where we can explore it, and we may not come up with the right answers. Obviously, we wouldn't come up with the right answers for each person. But I remember when we did the episode of Is Television Good or Bad for You? And I think it's part of the thing that we'll need to teach and talk about that has to do with... you were saying television is like smoking in that episode, which we expired because it was not our favorite. And we get to do things like that. But I think of it more like food, in the sense that you get to be in a relationship with food, and everybody has a different relationship with food. There are some people who have food sensitivities where, like, pineapple is neither good or bad. It does not, my body doesn't respond well to pineapple. So I don't need to eat it. And developing a relationship with yourself such that, and it's part of this waking up process is recognizing when something is too much of a thing for what you want your life to feel like right now, and what you need to be able to do in the day. And for me, the benefit of those 3 weeks is those 3 weeks were the 3 weeks that the only people that I needed to show up for were the people who hired me to play these characters in this show. That was my only responsibility. The only thing that was required of me. All of my expenses were taken care of at that time. There wasn't necessarily something I had to be doing with my life.
Right.
And I just had this very quiet, and I almost didn't have control over it because it was something that my body and brain decided for me. Yeah. And that's part of my path of recognizing that my body and brain has a relationship where it will show up and have responses to the world, and like nudging that around is one of my own. I don't know if it's edges. It's part of my path of figuring out how to Adrianne in the world, because sometimes my body and brain doesn't like to be stretched out of things, and it'll do, we know what we can do. We can do some sort of physical response, and then she'll have to do this thing we want.
Right.
where I have to stretch myself outside of these scary places.
You're not the only one who does that.
My nervous system and immune system thinks, oh, we know we're about to stretch and leap. So what we can do is we can get a cold or we can get a pain somewhere. Yeah. And so at that point in my life, I didn't have anybody I had to be accountable for. And it just was the adventure that I was on at the time. And it felt exhausting to fight it because and maybe
impossible to fight it.
My resistance had snapped. That might have been something burst.
Yeah.
Some old strategy, something burst. And there's other ways that that moment for me ended up being interesting in the years that came forward of my ideas of who I am when I'm capable and what the strategies are for getting things done. All of those needed to change and shift.
So I'm having an insight that's coalescing through this conversation.
Yeah.
That I think might be a good place to wrap up because I think we've gone over an hour again.
Sure.
Time flew this time.
Yeah. So
what is the difference between the pre-waking up phase and the post-waking up phase? And I think that one way to describe it is intention.
Yeah.
Or consciousness is another way to put it. Like using movies and TV, watching intentionally. And that's part of the difference that I see between those stories is that if you're sitting down and you're choosing to do this and you're saying, this is what I'm going to do, as opposed to you're not really making a choice, you're being compelled to do it. Mm-hmm. Even if you are being compelled to do it and you surrender to it, being congruent with what you're doing. And for me, when I was watching all the Buffy, Angel, Joss Whedon stuff, I was conflicted. I was watching it, but I knew I shouldn't be, and I felt terrible about it. But I wanted to. And maybe if I had said at the beginning of that whole time, you know what, I'm going to take a day or 2 days or 3 days or a week, and I'm going to watch all this stuff, and I'm not going to worry about anything else. Maybe I would have gotten it out of my system. But then it comes down to, what intention do you want to get out of this? Like I'm watching this and I'm opening up to it in specific ways, and I'm looking for the insights and the learning. And that's the biggest shift for me, is that when I watch things now, I'm like a detective going through looking for little, what is that? Is that a hint about what this really means?
Yeah.
And I don't even think that it really means anything. It's, what does it really mean to me? So I wonder if that threshold that you cross has to do with becoming intentional.
Totally. For me, the congruence of the person I started working with and the things, I think the easiest way for me to describe this is I walked in one day and I asked her, so do you meditate? Because we were doing certain things to give me different access to the way that my life would feel and who I was in my life. And she's like, I used to meditate, but I no longer need to meditate because I'm always meditating.
Right.
I live my life as a meditation. And I was like, And it reminded me of, and as you were talking, and I was thinking about the moment of shift for me, and it wasn't just intention around watching television. It was much like every beginning of a bunch of different video games, or the moment in any journey every movie or TV show that's about a quest. There's a moment when the hero decides that they recognize that they are on a quest and they take up the mantle. It's the moment that the sword is coming out of the stone. Excalibur is being pulled out of the stone, and you are now the king or queen or knight that is on this epic mission. And what I recognized was in that part of my life, I made the choice, or I was knighted on the journey of living a life that was like a spiritual quest, and TV as part of my life. Of course, this is my meditation. Every breath I take is my meditation. Everything I do, everyone I come into contact with is part of this journey, that we're all in it together. And so that just kept building and building the more and more I would watch. And because I grew up watching so much TV and having it part of my lineage and story, of course, this is another tool for me to utilize on this quest as I am, fulfilling my duty as this Sir Adrianne in the world, walking the path, whatever that might mean. And it's partly making more meaning of everything than many people make, and saying yes to my own, giving it weight, giving my own life and story a kind of weight, so that every decision I make, everything I'm in, can be meaningful, even if I'm just pooping.
Right.
Am I just pooping?
Right. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love listening to movie soundtracks when you're doing stuff in general, like making food. Or taking a shit or going pee, and it's the most dramatic thing. I also had the thought that another t-shirt for Enlightened Couch Potato could be making movies a meditation. Nice alliteration there. And on that note, poop reference, I think we're out.
Awesome.
Are we good?
I feel great. Do you feel good?
Yeah, this one flew by. So if you're out there and you're watching or listening to this, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your comments. We're going to be uploading these onto the various podcasting services and on YouTube very soon here. Yes, we wanted to get a little bit of a backlog, so they've just been on Facebook up till now. But if you're enjoying this, let us know, and tune in next week.
I'd love for people to share in comments what your television or movie lineage is, or whether you've had that waking up moment. Let us know. I'd love to hear about it.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, fabulous. We'll talk next week.
Have a good one.
Later.